I have a habit of telling people, you should write a book. And almost without fail, they look at me and say, oh no, my life is not that interesting. I think of a friend of mine, Julie. When she was just 15, she ran away from home in California and she headed for New York City with nothing. I don't know how she got there, but she did. And she was waiting tables at a restaurant when in walks Wilhelmina Cooper. She's the legendary founder of Wilhelmina Models. And Wilhelmina kind of discovered Julie, took her under her wing, and almost overnight, this runaway teenager was on the covers of every major magazine in the world, making millions of dollars. When I met her years later, I remembered her face from those magazines that I would get when I was a teenager. But the real story, the one that brought her to our little office in Asheville, was a map of success and stardom, yes, but also naivete, betrayal, abuse, and eventually recovery. When I told her she should write it down, she just downplayed it. She didn't think it was special in any way. And in a strange way, she was right. We love these stories because despite the glitz and the fame, we recognize ourselves in them. There's a quote we love that says, "Your life is a story too common to be told." It means that while the scenery changes, the plot of the human being's life is pretty much the same for all of us. In this episode, we aren't just looking at the events of our lives. We are reimagining the very foundation of our story. We're moving past the biography and looking at the existence within. Welcome to Becoming You, the Path to Consciousness, where we apply spiritual wisdom and truth to your everyday life. I'm Terry Hasty.
And I'm Haydn Hasty.
And today we're exploring the story of your life, not solely from the events and experiences or the biography of your life, but from the bigger picture and higher purpose.
I love talking about these things that we talk about life, about living. And I admit that one of the things that happened to me is that I find most of the other stuff just so boring. And I include myself that sometimes when I'm having a conversation with someone, I can find myself just talking about stuff or the past or what I think. I can even bore myself. But how much do I say during the day that really matters? There's just so much wasted time playing out that story that is not the story of our life.
I know. I was laughing as you were telling that because sometimes I listen to myself and it's like I'm watching myself from like 10 feet above going, geez, what am I going on about? But, with these current events, they're just very enticing. I think that's a big part of the wasted time or of unconscious conversation. It's so enticing to get caught up in the drama and the insanity. It's like, well, I might have my stuff, but I'm not that crazy, that, mean or stupid.
There are so many problems in the world today, but the reason that we haven't been able to solve them is because we don't know what the problem is. We think we do, but we don't. So everything just keeps repeating itself, like financial collapse in this country every 7-8 years, electing people over and over who are corrupt, not interested in the well-being of others, but in their own well-being. And it's just, it's part of that same old story, keeps playing out.
But we can bring that to the individual level. It's tempting to always look out there. But I was thinking about this, Hayden, when I would leave work when we were much younger and the kids were getting home from school. And I would get home to be there when they got off the bus. And then you would get home a couple of hours later. And before you even put your stuff down, you would say, have you fed the animals? And I did not hear that. I heard, what have you been doing since you got home if you haven't even fed the animals? And even though it happened regularly, I did not explore the source of your question. I certainly didn't explore the source of my defensiveness about it. I just went into my stuff telling you everything I had done for the last 3 hours. And then you'd get annoyed and go into your stuff. It was really just a battle of, what would you say, illusions. And then finally, after I don't know how long we played that game, it occurred to me that I was actually creating the conflict because what I really felt like you were saying, and what I believed was true about me, was I wasn't pulling my weight. I wasn't doing my part. I wasn't good enough. And we can't solve the conflict until we see what the real conflict is. The conflict wasn't you saying, what have you been doing? Or even, have you fed the animals yet? The conflict was my own self-doubt, which is what it is in most cases.
Well, because, both of us were aware of the game that was going on. I remember one day you said to me, "Oh, now I finally get it. You're not really asking me what have I done. You're asking me, did I feed the animals?" And I said, "No, I'm asking you, what have you been doing all this time?" Well, that was just
we don't play our games in a vacuum.
We have them
with one another, right?
It's difficult for the mind to consider that there's a transcendent consciousness, that there's something outside of itself. The physical senses are incapable of detecting the essence of this. And in other words, we don't really see what's going on. We think we do. But what we really see is just stuff and stuff moving around. But that's what these days and times are about. We're growing, but not very consciously. And we are continuing to choose to grow through pain and calamity and suffering, chaos.
I think it's hard, Haydn. In my own life too. Who's going to wake up or just in the middle of their life, whether you're running the kids to baseball or you're on a work trip or maybe a rough patch in your relationship or taking care of an aging parent, or maybe things are just going great. Who's going to wake up and suddenly say, I want to expand my life. I want to do something that's going to change the way I live my life. I think most people, and that would include me, to a large degree, delay and wait for the circumstances of life to dictate what I do next. And so we kind of change when our feet are held to the fire, or maybe our health suffers, or our relationship suffers, or the manhole cover slides open and down we go.
I remember a lot about that manhole cover. I remember when that feeling came over me when I hit that place in life and found myself in a really difficult situation. I think I was 39 years old when it started. The circumstances of life had descended upon me, and there was not going to be any way to avoid it. So essentially, I had two choices available to me. But without going into all the drama of those events, I realized that no matter what choice I made, my life was getting ready to change. And it took place literally over the period of a phone call. But as a result of that, it didn't take me much longer to decide, maybe a couple of minutes. And I chose the harder of the two paths because I realized that it was really the only path that I would be able to live with. So as a result of that decision, I set into motion a series of events that would last about 3 years, in which, although I didn't know it, it was going to radically alter my life in the most transformational way that I could have ever imagined. But of course, I couldn't see it or understand.
And you wouldn't have woken up that morning and said, "Boy, I hope this happens. I hope that."
No, of course not. Who does?
Yeah.
But that would involve the two of us coming together, which was the greatest part of it. But it did. It took me to the edge of what I was capable of enduring.
I think it's really interesting to look back at that time period. It seems like a blip on the screen, but in the midst of the heartache and the difficulty, it felt like it was never going to end. I remember laying in bed thinking, when is this dime going to turn?
Well, everybody hits the manhole cover, and there is an art and a science to that, but we're not taught that.
And I am really glad we were in it together.
Me too. I remember I told you one time that you didn't come into this lifetime to deal with much stuff. I remember telling you one time that your problem was that you didn't have any problems. And you said, well, I married you. I remember you saying that.
It just meant you had enough to share.
Right, I did.
Well, Hayden, I'm going to say something here, and you're just going to have to trust me. I'm going somewhere with it, so don't interrupt me or don't try to poo-poo what I'm about to say. You truly are a wonderful person. You're genuine, sometimes to a fault. And you listen to people and you see beyond their perceived shortcomings and into the best of them. You inspire others to aspire. you have incredible integrity, you have deep love for other people. But with all of that, to me, the thing that sets you apart is that you have been unrelenting. You have been unwilling to not put your effort and your attention toward this self-realization. And with that, also a real commitment to this. How do you teach? How do we teach this to others? And when I look at that, I came into a family and a set of circumstances where I was only loved and supported and given every opportunity. You came into a family and a set of circumstances where you went through every kind of abuse that no child should have to go through. But these conditions are not truly, they're not as difficult or as wonderful as they can be, is not what makes or breaks us. I was remembering a couple years ago when I was with Haley, our oldest daughter, and she said to me, "It's so sweet how you think Dad is perfect." And I do, Haydn. But I thought about it, and then I said, it's not that I think he's perfect. I choose to see him that way. And we're always at choice, whether it's about another person, how we perceive them, or ourselves. But the perfection I see in you is because you took those circumstances. I mean, you had to work through, I know even before I met you and then in our relationship together, the pain and confusion and anger around those difficult times as a child, but also as an adult. But you sought out teachers who helped you grow. You know, you did the work to take those events and use them as fodder for your evolution and coming into the realization of your.
You to say these things.
I told you not to interrupt me. I'm going somewhere with it.
I'm sorry.
And that you didn't just stay a victim of them, which would be easy for anyone to do. And that's what I'm getting at, Haydn. Your childhood circumstances don't make or break you. They are what your soul chose to learn, what it came here to learn. And you have made this a lifetime of learning and of teaching. And that is what I find to be so perfect. And also the fact that you continued to be kind of blind to all my shortcomings.
Well, I mean that. And I still mean that. I mean, you get upset about something that you did or said, and I'm like, oh please, stop wasting my
Amateur.
time. Right, you're an amateur. You know, you got nothing going there. But your life was not going to be about confronting the darkness or dealing with difficult internal issues. Or as one of my favorite quotes says, I always remember this, it should be a t-shirt, mine is the labor of the battling gods. And truly that really is the story of our life. It's coming to terms with who we think we are versus who we really are. And that wasn't going to have to be part of your path, as I've said and have told you before. You're just an angel hanging around, but I'm happy you decided to hang around me.
So they can all hear that you are blind to my shortcomings. But anyway, I think that, thank you, Haydn. I think that that all of us have a shadow. And
no, there's no thinking.
Okay.
We do. We come into birth with a knot, a K-N-O-T, that our evolutionary path is going to be about.
So even mine, which was coming into such a safe little nest that, you know, I continue to be the beneficiary of. But all of us have a shadow, and all of us are sparks of the divine on the planet. So even as a little one, as a child, I was aware that I did not have the same circumstances that some of my friends had that were more difficult. I thought I was the luckiest person in the world, but truly it kind of bothered me that I felt like I was lucky and that others were not. But what I've come to understand, it's not really about luck, but it is a choice, but it's that choice at the level of your soul or the spirit or the eternal part of you. And I chose the path that provide the circumstances for me to fulfill my destiny. And your soul chose your circumstances in order to learn what you came here to learn and to evolve in your specific way. So again, it's not, the childhood doesn't determine whether you're going to be well and happy, successful, anything.
No, of course not. And it's difficult for anyone who's not been trained in this or taught this to understand that there's nothing accidental. See, either it is or it ain't. Either everything is in a state of perfection or it's not. And you and I, when we first came together, we were in the beginning phases of learning so much about this, including the fact that the story of our life together, what we thought it was in the beginning, was not going to turn out to be that. It was far more than either one of us could have imagined. And that's what I want to talk about even a little more specifically in this episode.
Especially the truth that as your mind is, so will your future be. It's like saying, well, I knew that was going to happen, or I believe that can happen. It's kind of terrifying that I have that much influence over what happens, but it's also incredibly empowering.
As your mind is, so will your future be, as you said, is a different way of saying your outer world is a physical manifestation of your invisible inner condition. So, if you take a very careful look at that thought, and in the beginning, it can be terrifying to realize that that's how it's working. And it's not that I don't have my moments where, I just, collapse or move into fear about something. But, most of the time now it's like, well, God, I wonder what's going to happen next. All of the content in the mind has nothing to do with your existence, but is focused completely on your survival. It comes up with these childish solutions as to how to accomplish that. I mean, just outrageous stuff that all of us do in order to try to figure out how to be okay. But it is okay because we don't know anything else. But in any case, each of us can attest to, and I think I would say often with amazement, a perfect correlation, as I was saying earlier, between our inner state and the outer conditions that befall us, that we call forth and bring into our life, as if life were no longer unfolding from the outside in which we believed in the growing up process, but from the inside out. It seems that, right down to the most trivial circumstances, though, in fact, what I know to be certain now is nothing is trivial.
The way you just said that, it made me picture a rose opening like this. The bud is really tight, and then there's a transformation from the tight bud to a full bloom, and it unfolds from the inside out. But that's not how we actually start, is it? I mean, from day one, our eyeballs are facing out. We're looking outward, and we start building this reality or a truth based entirely,
we think it's true,
right, on what we see and what we perceive. But to add to that, we don't really have the context because we're young and inexperienced and we hadn't been here very long. So we start building this story that's kind of a house on shifting sand. We create this version of ourselves and the world that's essentially a work of fiction. And it's not because we're lying or there's anything malicious or wrong with us. It's because we're learning as we go. We're writing our life story based on kind of incomplete transformation. It's like getting in a car and expecting to learn to drive as you're driving down Interstate 40 or 81, whatever. So if we think about that for just a second, your mind is convinced it has the whole story. It's certain it has all the evidence it needs, and it's right about who you are, especially the parts of you that you don't like or that you're even ashamed of. But that story is based only on your experiences, not on your existence. Can you feel that difference? It's based on your experiences. Your experiences are like the weather. They come and they go, they storm, they clear up. But your existence, that is eternal. It's like the sky. It's stable. It's completely unthreatenable.
It holds everything, storms and good weather.
And because we don't realize this, we kind of lose the thread and we don't understand the purpose of what we're going through.
We think that what we're going through is the story of our life, and it's not.
And because we don't understand the events and our experiences, we don't know how to respond to them. We only know how to react. And that gets us in all kinds of trouble. We find ourselves endlessly confronting the upsets and even the void in our everyday lives, feeling like we're wandering around on lonely paths, when in reality, the source or the wellspring of our suffering is the same between all of us. If this resonates with you, if you feel that tug to move past your story and back into your existence, we would love to sit with you in person to do this work. And one opportunity for that would be at the Omega Institute, July 31st through August 2nd, where we are hosting a workshop. It's a space there at Omega that's designed specifically to help you unpack these fictions that you've built. And we'd love for you to join us there. You can find the link to more information about that in the show notes.
With the unpacking, if I heard you correctly, unpacking the fictions that we've built, in other words, the stuff in which we live, I want to talk about a phrase that I've been sitting with lately. It's I think I heard this. The person who used this phrase the first time, I think, was Congressman Rogue Corona. I think I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but he used this phrase, the Epstein class. And there's a journalist, his name is Anand Giridharadas, who wrote a brilliant book called Winners Take All. And it describes this group of people that the congressman referred to as the Epstein class. He describes the group as a segment of the ultra elite who are fundamentally amoral. It's not just about the wealth. It's about a total disconnection from right and wrong. They operate on a level where people are just variables to be manipulated and extracted for profit. They've mastered the art of looking into the camera and saying all the right things, but at the same time, while being completely hollow or even predatory behind the scenes that we see each day, the Epstein class just expands and expands. And the same is true. It doesn't make any difference whether it's a billionaire or a poor person. And the uncomfortable truth is that in the absence of meaning, in the absence of a conscious understanding of your existence, every human being, rich or poor, will resort to seeking fulfillment out there in the world, in the material world, whether it's the accumulation of wealth or it's the accumulation of sexual experience. It doesn't make any difference. Every individual will try to fix that inner condition, that emptiness, that lack of understanding with an outer solution. It doesn't make any difference if you have $50 or 50 billion. If that foundation and understanding is missing, which is really true for all of us, then the result is the same. Years ago, I was talking to someone very close to me. We were talking about inner strength. And he looked at me and he said, the only reason you're saying that is because you don't have the kind of money I have. He truly believed that his bank account would keep him safe. And I told him, I said, that is true. I said, but one day we will all find out that the only strength is inner strength. 2 weeks later, he lost his job. And because he had never dealt with the internal limitations that caused the loss in the first place, he never went back to work. He became bitter and enraged. And why? Because when the outer truth that he thought was truth was stripped away, there was nothing underneath to catch him, for him to anchor into, to understand. And this is the exact same spiritual bankruptcy that we see in the Epstein class. When you don't know who you are, why you're here, your relationship to the divine, you become capable of looking away from any amount of pain. And as long as you're okay, it doesn't matter who gets hurt.
And if I'm not connected to myself, it makes sense. I really am not going to be able to be connected to anybody else.
Exactly. And that same statement could go on another 30 sentences. If you can't love yourself, you can't truly love anybody else. But I'm not here to moralize or throw stones. We've all made mistakes, and every human being has made sexual mistakes. But when we see these patterns of behavior, particularly when they persist deep into adulthood, then it's a signal that that foundation or understanding
Or that
is missing.
something's missing in the person's
So,
life.
well, it's what we're trying to clarify is what it is that's missing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the story of your life is not about pain and suffering, but it's about the awakening to the truth of who and what you are. I'm not arguing against sex or money or fulfilling your greatest dreams in the physical world. In fact, it's vital for the individual to pursue that. We should pursue those things. But when there's no spiritual foundation, the path always leads to a slow, inevitable rot.
And don't you think kind of disillusionment?
Of course, but that's what we're witnessing in the country today. And in these elite circles, it isn't just political. It's not just a political crisis. It's moral poverty. It's a life of self-deceit that eventually, collapses under its own weight. And where that begins to change is when the vertical or the spiritual begins to enter the mind. Eventually, as time goes by, the lower mind realizes that it's better off adhering to those higher truths because it's sick and tired of suffering and being afraid all the time. Mm-hmm. It begins to find a peace and a power that it could never find out there in the material world. And this new consciousness that is being born today in this world of collapse and corruption, it's not just for the elite or for the monks, those living in the ashrams and the monasteries. It is the only safeguard that humanity has left, and it's available to us right now.
So it's not that this is too abstract for any of us to understand, because we do get it, that the only true strength is inner strength. I think that that's something we can acknowledge. If the story of your life is not about your experiences, your childhood, your past, then what is it about?
Well, essentially, it's about self-realization. Mm-hmm. And self-realization is that you're not just connected to God, you are God. As a spark of God, as has been said a million times, you're made in the image of. And I remember the first time that I read that line, your life is a story too common to be told. Now, at first, when you think of it, you might experience what I did, which is my breath kind of stopped.
Stings a little.
Stings a little. It doesn't mean that you're not unique. It means that the plot that you're living out is virtually the same as everybody else's. The ups, the downs, the goods, the bads, the pleasures, the pains, the marriages, the divorces, on and on and on. I mean,
we're all trying to survive, to have a better life, to be loved. Sometimes you're just trying to find a reason to get out of bed, but all of us have these very similar. That's why we love storytelling, because it sounds like our own story in some ways.
We get caught up in it because we don't know anything else. And so we think that is the story, which is perfectly understandable. It's not a condemnation. It's just an objective observation of how my mind is operating. My mind thinks I am this experience of like being rejected or being loved or being rich or being poor. It doesn't really make any difference. But for that story to change, for the life to change, for it to become truly satisfying, it's going to have to evolve. And the best way to do it is, instead of learning through, a conspiracy of circumstances in life, the best way to learn it is consciously, to begin to consciously create a path of self-discovery from the outer world of survival to the inner world of the invisible. And I don't, like I said, I don't mean just being aware that God or the divine exists. I mean being conscious of it and in it, that it's not just you, it's every soul that is in physical manifestation here. We are all part of the same. We are one another. And realizing that you are not and never have been separate from the divine, your life can begin to take on a different journey. It's not about building a resume and becoming successful. However, that is very important in the early stages of life. But as we get somewhere between 36 and 45, it's about the realization of this slow, beautiful understanding that you are a spark of that light, of that unfolding.
So if the story you've been telling yourself isn't actually you, then of course that's great news. You're not who you think you are. And because you aren't that person, a whole new story can begin. But I want to keep it real. It's going to require a disruption. I remember, Haydn, when you and I started this work, I was really worried, resistant that I would have to give up my fun side, or I would have to give up my lazy side, or I would have to give up.
I can be a little too serious at times.
The things that that I really thought defined me, that am I going to have to give those up? But really it's about just dislodging the mind's addiction to the past, and to identifying as our, like you said, failures and our mistakes and our suffering and our experiences. But we can create a space where the truth isn't just a concept that like I do believe I'm a spark of the divine, but it's a reality you experience, to experience yourself as the spark of the divine, and to choose that. Like I choose to see you as perfect, I can choose to see myself the same way.
So think of it this way, what you just said, and it's such a beautiful analogy. The realization may be very comparable to story after story after story after story of reaching Mount Everest. The easy part is getting up there. The easy part is the realization. The hard part is coming back down.
And applying it and living that.
And going through the death zone and making it back to base camp. The same thing is true in spiritual work. Part of the easy stuff is the realization, and then the work begins. Now, how do I bring that back down into my everyday life and have the courage to live out of that? And that's a very different reality. We all invest so much energy in these trivial realities that we've manufactured and imagined over the course of our life, and we all do it. So that is part of the process.
Obsessively sometimes.
Well, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because that's where we are from an evolutionary point of view. We have not moved out of the mental. But there are other worlds beyond this one, worlds with their own laws, worlds with their own, you could say, luminous truths. And one of the things that will buckle your knees is the realization that it has its own will. It is the evolutionary process that unfolds. It has its own will, its own destination. But then there is the destination of the individual, of the soul. So I've caught more than a sliver of these other realities from out-of-body experiences that I've had, from the experiences that I've had in deep meditation. And I'm simply saying that it is more real than the chair that I'm sitting in. And in that space, now I'm getting ready to contradict myself, because there are no words for that other reality that is seeking to manifest itself now in the physical, that is at the heart of this collapse and upheaval that we are witness to. There is no duality. All there is unity. There's no such thing as division. All is a unified consciousness that not only possesses it, but is in it and included and is part of that.
It's even the phrase, a love that passeth all understanding.
Exactly. It's impossible, because it goes so far beyond the mind. I mean, every great philosophy and religion has suggested the phrase, the kingdom of heaven is not here, that it is somewhere else, that we have to figure out how to get there. And of course, that is not true. The will of the divine, the will of the process, which is the same thing as you, the will of the individual, is the realization of itself in physical form.
So really that somewhere else, if it's not here, it's somewhere else, is actually right here inside of you.
Always has been, always will be, and will not be found anywhere else. And that is the story of your life, is the realization of that, of peeling back all of the material sensory recordings that your mind has to see that essential truth that is the essence of who and what you are. So I'll ask the question again in a little different way. Why would I trade that vast, immense, beyond words love and safety for my own personal insanity? Because that's what we do. But it's okay. It's just part of the process and how we operate currently. But that is what this collapse is about. We are moving into a new consciousness.
So we kind of cling to these, our anxieties, our grudges, our stories, like they're the truth, they're the raft that's going to carry us home, when actually they're the very things that are sinking us.
Of course. Absolutely.
So it's about recognizing that your personal story, that one that keeps you awake at 3 a.m., is actually a closed tape loop. It's like an echo. It's not really you. It's just old noise. It's based on the past, but you have the authority, you have the opportunity to step out of that. And we state at the beginning of every episode that we apply spiritual wisdom and truth to our everyday lives. So that's what we're going to do right
Let's
now.
do it.
Yeah.
Right.
We've always
get right to it.
We've already mentioned a few of these things, but we just want to really reinforce them now. As your mind is, so will your future be. So train your mind around that. Don't just let it be lazy and take what it comes. As your mind is, so will your future be.
The story of your life is not what you think it is. It is about self-realization. It's not about your suffering. It's about essentially your spiritual ascent and realization. I know it sounds esoteric in a certain way, but it's actually, it's a total revolution of the mind. Most of us spend our entire lives editing and re-editing and telling that same old story over and over again. But what if it's not the story of your life? The more you anchor yourself in these truths, like as my mind is, so will my future be, which that's just a very simple little beginning. But the more you anchor yourself in these truths, the more your outer life begins to conform to them.
What if when you said the story, we keep telling the same old story, the story sometimes of our suffering. I remember when you said, I'm so tired of telling my story of suffering. But what if if that's not the story, if suffering is not the lead character, but the lead character is actually the transcendent within?
Well, it's like a loud noise or music in the background. The level of signal that you are capable of picking up on is completely dependent upon the level of background noise. And so if you look at your mind, and it doesn't take any talent whatsoever to do this, you see how crazy you are. You see how your mind is filled with unstoppable noise and an endless parade of the same old thought patterns over and over and over again. And what do we do when we get in a situation like that? Like when we're in the car and the music is blaring, but our phone rings and we have to turn the noise down. We shut the radio off, or we do everything we can to get some stillness in order to truly hear what that person is saying. It may be an important phone call, but you don't keep playing the music. You start shutting the noise down so you can hear. So this is how you begin to build a life that is immune to the craziness, to the collapse, to the meaninglessness. And when you have and begin to build that inner compass that is pointed towards your spiritual realization of yourself, or the
and
truth of who you are and your existence, you don't need to manipulate anybody. You don't need to end up belonging to the Epstein class. You don't need to live two different lives in order to try to fulfill something that is never going to fulfill you. Spiritually bankrupt and insulated from others. It's going to turn out that you're not looking for a purpose. The purpose is already there inside of you.
You are the purpose.
You are the
Gotcha.
purpose.
The inner attitude has the power to create your outer circumstances, good and bad. In other words,
Yikes.
It's not being done to you. You are it. Yeah. The inner attitude, your inner attitude has the power to create your outer circumstances.
So with that in mind, another spiritual truth, you are never upset for the reason you say or think. You are always upset about something inside of you, and that something inside of you is related to your self-doubt.
Like, have you fed the animals yet? There I go into this whole tirade about how I'm not being appreciated.
I think I'll do that
weight
tonight when we get home. Ask you if you fed the animals, see if you've made any progress.
Well, I have.
I know you have.
The story of your life, which is the same thing as the goal of your life, is to become a conscious human being in an unconscious world. And I cannot imagine another time, at least in recent history, where that is a more important truth to focus on, to really the change that the most important thing I can do is to become conscious, is to really write my story, not from my past and from old laws and old perceptions that are not only outdated, but probably fictional in the first place, but to really start creating this story from the truth of who I am.
There's nothing wrong with starting from the premise of acknowledging, I don't know what I'm doing. Because if I did, I'd be happy. I'd be fulfilled all the time. I would see perfection even in the middle of disaster. But we don't do that, and that's okay. In my years of working with people all this time and doing this work, there's one thing that I have noticed that has a lot to do with these current events that we're dealing with. There are two groups of people, in my opinion, which doesn't mean anything, but who often struggle the most with these concepts that we're discussing. And what we are discussing is the idea of choosing a spiritual path or realizing a deeper truth about yourself. And those two groups are the very poor and the very rich. I know it sounds like a contradiction, but they actually are very close, accurate mirrors of one another. Both are trapped in a perceptual field of scarcity. Neither group feels like they have enough. For both, the luxury of dedicating their life to a higher purpose feels out of reach because they view the world through that narrow lens of surviving. The poor are consumed by the weight of trying to figure out how to get just a little bit more. And the ultra rich, or you could say what it's now being referred to as the Epstein class, are often consumed by the fear of how to keep what they have, making sure that nobody else gets it. But it's just two different sides of the same coin, a life that is dictated by what we can win or lose in the physical world, with no relationship to the spiritual or the invisible spiritual that lies inside of you. So this is the shift that all of us are being asked to make today, to examine the story of our life, which is not what we think it is. Our destination for all of us is exactly the same.
So before we go, I would like to invite you to look at one thing, to think about just one challenge that you're facing right now. Maybe it's a tension at work, or a snag in a relationship, or maybe it's just a quiet struggle within yourself about meaning or purpose. And now ask yourself, are you responding to this from a place of inner stability? Is the flashlight shining in? Or are you reacting from the confines of your old story? This always happens to me. I'm always disrespected, whatever that voice says, the one that always leaves you feeling just a little bit less than. And I invite you to remember this, that inner stability isn't something that you have to build. It is your existence. It is already there. It is eternal. It is your unthreatenable self with the big S. And when you hook into that truth, the difficulties don't necessarily disappear, but the power that they previously had over you disappears, or at least lessens. Your life story is so profound, but we all write it in the wrong direction. We write it from the outside in based on what happens to you. So starting today, I just invite you to write your story from the inside out, like that rosebud that we talked about a little earlier, opening, expanding, and meeting the world from that place of beauty and original wholeness. The rosebud has everything it needs to be that beautiful bloom. There is truth to live, and there is work to do. And the very best part is the rest of your life is just beginning.
The story of your life, as we end this episode, the story of your life is about realizing many spiritual truths, but most importantly, the truth about who and what you are and what you're doing here, and then having the courage to live out that truth and become who you truly are. So I'll finish my comments with this wonderful quote that I love, that is at the end of the greatest book that I've ever read. And this is what it says: awakened to the meaning of my heart, that to feel love and oneness is to live. In this, the magic of our golden change is all the truth I know or seek, O sage. I love that quote.
I do too. Thank you so much for joining us. And please consider joining our private online community at becomingyoujourney.com. You can find out more about our work at truthspringasheville.com and see our many resources, from face-to-face workshops and individual coaching that can be virtual or face-to-face. And remember to check out the consciousness workshop at the Omega Institute in New York. That's July 31st through August 2nd. And being immersed in that kind of retreat setting is so much better than an online course or, different kinds of workshops. You really be immersed and get away and have time to unravel and rewrite that story. We'd love to see you there, and you'll see a link to find out more about all of our work at truthspringasheville.com.
And don't let the story of your life become a story too common to be told.
Take care. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.